A drawing of a face which is recognizable. A drawing of a chair which looks like a chair. Is that a good drawing? By no means. It must have more, qualities which turn it into a work of art. If nature set the standard, then the drawing of a beautiful woman would necessarily be beautiful, and the drawing of an ugly woman unpleasing. No, art transcends nature. It has its own rules and laws. It transforms, creating a new image in its own right. How then do we judge a drawing? How do we recognize its quality? Let us take a number of drawings of acknowledged excellence by artists of various schools and periods, shuffle them like a pack of cards, and try to find out what they have in common. In order to judge the quality, we must first of all know something about the method employed. There must be unity of method. If the individual line is chosen to convey sense and meaning, then everything must be summed up in such a way that the line explains, the line holds our interest and excites us. Pisanello arranged the position of his horse in such a way that a continuous outline could convey its bulk. Holbein placed Lady Audley so that her cheek, nose, mouth, eyes could be realized with a thin, sensitive line. The pendant at her neck is drawn in exactly the same way as the features. Botticelli, too, for the cloak worn by Beatrice, used the same technique. He drew the fluttering material with rigid lines. There is, however, a method where the individual line by itself does not carry the same weight of importance, does not play the same part in explaining the subject. It is a method where each line must be seen in its context with other accompanying lines, where the individual line loses its importance and plays its part only when the detail is forgotten and the total seen as a whole. Delacroix, in his Rearing Horse, did not seek outlines. The drama of the moment is expressed by the contrast of lighter and darker areas. There is no outline. There is only the clash of brightness and shadow. Tiepolo, in his Face of a Man, did not explain the bulging of the lips or the hollows of the eyes with clean, crisp, individual lines. He bunched his lines together, created a face out of shadows from many little strokes and the light areas of the paper. Clearly, only when one is aware of the method employed by a draftsman can one decide how well he has achieved his ends. One of the first aims of every drawing is to create form and volume. The artist of Paleolithic times, who drew this rhinoceros on the walls of his ancient cave, used few spare lines to create his form. It is the assured way in which he bent his lines to give his animal weight and bulk that raises his work into the realm of art. Raphael, in his Head of a Woman, created a simple monumental form by the few pure lines employed. Like a column, the neck rises from the shoulders. Like a ball, the round shape of the head is set on it. All the tectonic clarity and classical symmetry in the Italian art of his period are epitomized in such a seemingly simple drawing. Could line play a different role? Dürer, in his Head, lets it convey the northern love of expressive movement. He turns the head in such a way that the outline must follow the cheek and chin. The shape of the nose cuts across the eyes to make his line twist and weave along the concave and convex forms. In these last drawings, the line by itself is meaningful. It has to be followed, and its purpose has to be judged. In turning to the other method of drawing, new and different criteria have to be used. This man writing by Cézanne contains no lines which in themselves demand admiration for their flow and movement. Here, the accents of dark patches on a blank paper are so well placed that the form of the head, its position in front of the body and above the writing paper, are explained by different but no less effective means. Light takes over the role which line has played in other drawings, and it is caught in a way which seems very easy, but is in fact most difficult to achieve. Rembrandt used the same effect in his Jan 6 at work. Light floods the room and envelops the figure, and here it is the contrast of the dark, tall hat which provides us with a measure for the form of the face. Rembrandt's lines are mostly straight, direct. Using a minimum of these, he explains the transition of forms. How an arm grows out of a shoulder, how a head turns, how an apron falls. More than that, nose, mouth, and chin are drawn by one single, impulsive stroke of the pen. This is not imitating nature. It is recreating forms seen by the artist. In Degas' woman drying herself, the spine may or may not stand up to anatomical scrutiny, but the deep shadows of the black chalk make it look like a valley between the mountains of the shoulder blades. The shoulders in Picasso's End of a Monster are not level. One side grows out of the neck at a higher level than the other. But all the obvious deformations in the drawing look right, not in the anatomical, but in the expressive, that is, artistic sense. We have been looking so far at form and volume. What we did not take into account is the extent to which an entirely abstract formal idea may be at the back of the artist's mind. Geometrical figures come into it, consciously or unconsciously. How much that surrounds us in our daily life is based on the circle or the square or other geometrical formulae. Think of our vases and plates, which have not changed their shape for 1,000 years. When Watteau drew this man bending forward, he continued the line of the arm into the back, on into the shoulder, and the other arm, to achieve a circular movement which has at its base the strong horizontal lines in the stomach of the man. Michelangelo's Virgin holds her child in such a way that her arms and the body of the child are creating one circular shape on top of the vertical of the legs. The very same formal relationship is the basis of Picasso's drawing of a nude doing her hair. The arms and shoulders form almost a complete circle over the vertical axis of her legs. Even head and hands are resolved in the shape of circles. Ingres, in his study for the Golden Age, drew a number of oval shapes. A clear oval, formed by the outline of the back and head and arm, balances on the rigid vertical of the left leg. Degas' body of a reclining girl would seem to be the very natural image of a young, breathing body. Yet the formal shape of it is a rigid one. The two sides of the body are held by two parallels. And strict parallels run in the other direction, the line on top of the head, the shoulder, and the line of the garment. It is the hallmark of a good drawing that the subject is expressed without the formal intentions of the artist being too obvious. When Joseph Hermann draws two fishermen mending their nets, they look real and natural, and it is hardly noticeable that the movements of the men are poured into the container of permanent geometric forms, the oval of the fisherman's back, the semicircle of his extended legs. When the same formal considerations are extended to every part of a drawing, we speak of unity of design. Don't misunderstand the meaning of the word design. It has nothing to do with composition. Composition is the arrangement of objects or figures in depth. It's as if their positions and movements on the stage were arranged by the artist. By design, we mean the ornamental connection of all things drawn on the surface of the paper. In Raphael's Men Carrying the Body of Adonis, a man lifts Adonis from behind. This would be a simple description. Artistically, their bodies are connected by design. The outlines of this man's back and arm curve down into the body of Adonis, which continues this movement. Holbein, in drawing Sir Thomas More's son, has to wrestle with the problem of how to fit his sitter's hands into the corner of the drawing. He solved it by summing up his forms with a few lines and fitting hands and book into the circular movement which runs down from one shoulder and rises again into the other, cutting off the corners and leaving his figure full square on the page. Conscious design is inherent in Fragonard's landscape of the Villa d'Este. The round shapes of the trees and bushes provide him with the key to the design. In order to prevent the balustrade in the foreground from introducing a dissonant, sharp right angle, Fragonard placed a little figure at its base, and thus preserved and emphasized the round curves in his landscape. Joseph Hermann's On the Road to Rome achieves the same unity with verticals. Cypresses, haystacks, cartwheels, and the three legs of his horse are the rigid struts of his design. We have talked about method, about form, volume, and design. Something must be said about the actual handwriting of the artist. Every great draftsman can be recognized by his handwriting, by the degree of flow and rhythm, of sharpness and crispness he imparts to his line. If a man impresses his own very personal style of drawing on every subject, he has forced upon the world around him his own vision. Tintoretto's drawings, for instance, always employ little hooked strokes to express the form, whereas Delacroix embodies the best in the French tradition by a flowing, elegant line. Another point, in a really good drawing, it is obvious that the artist does not use a recipe, does not follow a formula, but invents an ever-varying repertory of graphic signs. In a Rembrandt drawing, you feel that the artist has no preconceived method, but invents on the spur of the moment, in the act of drawing. There are no two mouths, no sets of eyes, which are drawn identically. Victor Hugo used any material at hand, a small torn piece of paper, ground coffee, cigarette ash, to preserve the immediate impact of an impression and to translate it into a drawing which then, however small in actual size, testified to the grandeur of his romantic vision. The good draftsman also used, consciously or unconsciously, the available surface area of his paper in an economic, ingenious way. In Millet's Peasant Woman with a Sheaf of Corn, the arm is like a central pillar, and the corners of the paper are untouched and left blank in perfect balance. Figures should be related to the space in which they are placed. When Barlach drew these Russian peasants, he allowed the rhythm of the slow, rolling river landscape to continue into the very figures. Toulouse-Lautrec made a superb poster of the dancing troupe of Mademoiselle Églantine. It's good because the artist made his very lines dance, skip along the raised skirts, bob and wriggle along the plumed hats. The straight lines of legs act like the staccato accents of a fiddle, providing a counterpoint theme in a musical composition. I've left something to the end. A good drawing must be expressive. To recognize this quality requires no expert eye. Anyone can see that Dürer, when drawing his mother, did not embellish her sunken cheeks, her squinting eyes, but he endowed the face with all her natural characteristics, accentuated by old age. Goya's standing woman, like the rock she leans upon, has clearly weathered the ravages of war. And Henry Moore, in his drawing of Two Sleepers, has summed up all the fatigue and exhaustion of wartime shelter life. The great draftsman of every period finds his own theme, his own symbols, and his drawings express what he has to say in a medium that everyone with eyes can understand.